So good morning, good evening, everybody. We will get started with the prayer. Please listen.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarot tam pravaram muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi.
Okay, namaste everybody. Welcome back to our fourth session on the classic text Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So with this session, we will conclude the first topic, which is the introduction. So in our first session, we had a brief overview of the Indian spiritual tradition. Especially we saw what is Vedic and what is non-Vedic. And we saw where exactly yoga fit into this tradition. And in our second session, we had a brief history of the yogic tradition, starting from the Vedic period to the International Day of Yoga time frame. So a long period of history we covered briefly in one session. And in the third session, we try to understand an integrated view of the yoga, especially when you think about the different disciplines of yoga, Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Karma Yoga, how all these things fit together, and what is the springboard in which all these different disciplines fit together and sequenced. I know that it was a little bit of overwhelming session. A lot of people reached out to me offline. Not a problem, because this is just a preview. We are going to deep dive into that once we go to the actual sutra. And we may revisit that topic a little bit later, but just wanted to give a quick introduction. So with that, we are coming to that final introductory session, which is introducing the text we are studying, which is the Yoga Darshana, and also the author or the compiler of this text. It's our tradition to understand briefly the text and a high-level overview of the compiler before we deep diving into the text. That is the objective of today's session. So today we will talk quickly about the Yoga Darshana or the Yoga Sutra, the book, not about the entire yogic tradition, but about the text. And also we will talk a little bit about Maharishi Patanjali, who is the compiler of the text. And from next Sunday onwards, we will start with the first chapter, verse 1. So this is the quick overview. With that, we can quickly get started. So the Yoga Sutra, the textbook is known as Yoga Darshana. We already talked about what is Darshana. This is the fundamental textbook of yoga. So Dr. Radhakrishnan, who is the second president of India and who is well known for his deep knowledge in this Vedic tradition, for his research, Maharishi Patanjali composed this Yoga Sutra or the Yoga Darshana around 2nd century BCE during the Maurya Empire. Again, there is no clarity or consensus over the time period in which it is composed, but the general understanding is that this Yoga Darshana was composed between 2200 to 2500. So Radhakrishnan, who is an authority, so that's why I'm going with his definition. That doesn't mean that it is correct, but the general understanding is that this book or this composition was made in BC, 2nd century BC. And in this book, Maharishi Patanjali, he captures and systemizes the entire vision of the yoga in a very scientific, in a very logical manner. So that is the Yoga Sutra or the Yoga Darshana. This book, Yoga Darshana, is known as Yoga Sutra, popularly known as Yoga Sutra. Even though we call it, means the book is Yoga Darshana, it is known as Yoga Sutra. Why? The reason is it belongs to a particular category of spiritual literature known as sutras. So when you look at the Vedic tradition, there are different layers of scriptures. And one of such scripture category is known as sutras. So before we get into Yoga Sutra, we need to understand what exactly is sutra literature and how a sutra literature is compiled and what is the speciality of this sutra literature. That will help you to appreciate this sutra. So let's see what is a sutra, because the first point is Yoga Darshana is known as Yoga Sutra because it belongs to the category of the literature sutras. So let's see, what is the sutras? Sutra literally means a thread. That's all it means. In the spiritual, scriptural world, especially in the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain tradition, the sutra literature is extensively used. It means that it's an aphorism. Aphorism means it's a line or it's a formula. Aphorism means it's a line or it's a formula, and a collection of such compilations forms an entire manual on a particular subject matter. So think about this. It is like the beads of pearls connected by a string. Together forms a mala or a chain. Why? Because this thread connects all these things together to formulate a different point of view, a combined point of view, an integrated point of view. So each seed can be considered as one aphorism, and all these aphorisms, related aphorisms, connected through the common thread of yoga, forms the Yoga Sutra. So sutram iva sutram. So a thread, just like the common theme yoga, connects the individual sutras and forms together the entire vision of the sutra. And again, each of these sutras are cryptic statement in a very short letters, like an equation. A simple example will make this point very clear. E equal to mc square. Everybody know that. It is the famous equation of Einstein, which shows the relationship between matter and energy. So you can write a volume on this subject, but that entire concept can be represented by a single equation in a short form. Like that, the vision of the yoga is vast, wide, and deep. It can be encapsulated into a small aphorism. That's what a Yoga Sutra does. So sutra, essentially, it's a cryptical, it's a consolidated statement. It expresses a vast idea with a few words. Why this literature was created means, remember at that tradition, that time of the ancient Vedic tradition, everything was oral. It has to be learned and passed down. So this was an easy way to capture everything in a simpler shorthand form and easy to remember. This is what a sutra is. And let's try to see the definition of the sutra. So the definition of the sutra is given by Vayu Purana, because Purana is another category of literature we have in our Vedic tradition. And there are 18 Puranas and 18 Upapuranas. And Vayu Purana is one of the main Purana. It gives a brilliant definition of the literature sutra. It tells Alpaksharam Asanniktham Saravat Vishwato Astobham Anavadyam Cha Sutram Sutravido Viduhu. This is the Sanskrit definition. I'm not complicating with Sanskrit, I will explain. So once again, Alpaksharam Asanniktham Saravat Vishwato Astobham Anavadyam Cha Sutram Sutravido Viduhu. Sutram Sutravido Viduhu means the learned people call this as sutra if it satisfies the above conditions. What are all the above conditions? Alpaksharam, that which is a few words. You cannot write a big literature epic and call it as a sutra. It has to be very short form. So Alpaksharam, Alpa means small, Aksharam means letters. Small number of letters. You should write it In modern parlance, you see that, right? When you create an executive presentation, they always say that it should not be more than 24 letters or 4, 6, 8 words, etc. Exact same rule. Alpaksharam. Second thing is asannigdham. Asannigdham means it cannot be ambiguous. It has to be unambiguous. When you express a concept in a language, it means only one thing. It cannot be misinterpreted. A simple example, artificial intelligence world, you always give this example. What is that? I saw a boy in a park with a telescope. Think about this. I saw a boy in a park with a telescope. Who has the telescope? Think through that. I have the telescope or the boy has the telescope? It can be interpreted in both ways. So that's why it's a context-free sentence, context-sensitive sentence. But sutras cannot be like that. So when you compose a sutra, if there is a possibility of a different interpretation, you should make sure that that is clarified. That is why asannigdham. Then saravat vishwato mukham. So it has to be, it has to have good content, and it has to express a vast idea in a gist form. It should be very concentrated. It cannot be just diluted. So there has to be some substance or content in every sutra. You cannot just put something like that. Vishwato mukham. It has to have a universal outlook. You cannot write a sutra for Hindus or Indians or a particular males or a particular caste or a particular profession. Whatever you say in a sutra, it has to be applicable to all the people at all the time. It cannot be, it has to be inclusive. It cannot be excluded. Nobody can be excluded from that. So saravat vishwato mukham. Astobham. Astobham means it cannot be repetitive. Because if you take the complementary yogic scripture, Bhagavad Gita, you can see a lot of repetition. Krishna tried to repeat it again and again and again, so that it is struck in our head. But you won't see that type of repetition in Yoga Sutra or any sutra literature. Then anavadyamcha, it cannot be dismissed by logic easily. Yeah, certainly there are something which is above the logic, but it cannot be against the logic. That's another rule. Sutram sutra vidu vidu. So this is the beautiful definition of sutra in Vayu Purana. So that which of few words, unambiguous, expresses a vast idea with a universal outlook, non-repetitive, and it cannot be, you cannot find a fault logically. So that type of literature is known as sutra. Just think of this. You don't have to study the whole verse, but understand this is what is a sutra. Look at the thinking. So if you want to compose a sutra, it has to fit into this definition. Good. So let's continue. So there are large number of sutras in our Vedic literature. The 4 major one I just wanted to highlight is Brahma Sutra of Seth Badarayana. A lot of people think that it is Vyasa, but I personally think that it is different. So Sage Badarayana, who composed a sutra literature known as Brahma Sutra, very profound, very deep. We will study hopefully once this covered. Once we complete the Upanishads, we will get into the Brahma Sutra. Then the most popular one is Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which explores the Yoga Darshana. Then in the Bhakti, the devotional literature, there is something called Bhakti Sutra of Sage Narada. Sage Narada composed a sutra literature known as Bhakti Sutra, Narada Bhakti Sutra. So that is very popular. And I cannot miss the last one, Ashtathyayi of the Panini. Panini, who is considered as the father or the linguistic expert, Sage Panini, he composed a sutra form, the entire grammar rule of Sanskrit, known as Ashtathyayi. Extremely profound, and that was composed in the sutra form. So one thing means one of the shortest sutra in the history of sutra comes in this Ashtatyayi. It is known as A. That's it. A. 2 letters. So these are examples of some of the popular literatures in sutras. So Brahma Sutra, Yoga Sutra, Bhakti Sutra, and Ashtatyayi. Of course, there are sort of other sutras like the Sankhya Sutra, the Vaisheshika Sutra, the Nyaya Sutra. These are all from the Hindu Vedic tradition. But you can see a lot of Agama Sutra in the Jains. In Buddhist tradition, you can see a lot of sutras. So there are a lot of sutras in different traditions. And these are some of the popular sutras in the Vedic tradition. So moving ahead, what exactly is this Yoga Sutra now? It is written as Sutra. So we already saw that it expounds the yogic tradition. What happens is Patanjali took all the practices that leads towards the self-realization. If you remember the class or the session last week, we said yoga has 2 different meanings. One is the ultimate meaning is the union with your own true self or self-realization, understanding your own true nature. That is one thing. The second thing we said is any practice that leads towards a stable, pure mind or a controlled mind is also yoga. So Patanjali took all such practices and put together this literature, Yoga Sutra. And the key focus of the Yoga Sutra is how to reach this path of self-realization. The predominant focus is on the meditative techniques. Meditation plays a significant role in the Patanjali scheme of things. So it's a psychosomatic techniques of meditative practice. So this can be considered as the most authoritative book on all the meditative practices. When we get into the sutra, you will see any meditation technique you do in the corporate world or modern world, anything, whoever has invented anything, you can see that it can be traced back here. And when you think about the treatment of the mind in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it can be easily concluded. You will agree with me once you get into the actual sutra. This is the earliest psychology book ever somebody has composed. Of course, Bhagavad Gita is also there. These are the 2 books. I can understand in 19th century when people say that Sigmund Freud is the father of the psychology, because this Indic literature was not visible at that point of time. But even after exposing this scripture, which goes to the mind much deeper than even the modern psychology goes, you need to understand that this book goes through the human mind in that type of depth, which is mind-blowing. So you will understand that. So this is another key point. It covers a lot of psychology, and you will listen, right? So when we go step by step in the sutras, you will see how much discussion about the human mind comes here. 95% of the time, you're going to talk about the human mind. And the metaphysical model used in the Yoga Sutra is Sankhya. Remember, we talked about that since 6th Darshana. But Sankhya is used as a metaphysical model only, but not much interest is given in what is the metaphysical model of the universe. Whether it is Sankhya or Vedanta, but Patanjali is more focusing on the practices. So just need to understand, even though the metaphysics is Sankhya, but not a lot of importance is given to metaphysics. More importance is given to the actual practice. So that is what makes this book very unique. So systematic unfoldment of the path of meditation. This is the Yoga Sutra. This is the theme of the Yoga Sutra. Now, little bit, I'm not going a lot on the Sankhya literature, but just a very high level understanding and some of the technical terms of Sankhya. In Sankhya, what they call is Purusha and Prakriti. These are the 2 terms you need to understand. Everything in the universe is manifested of Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the pure consciousness or your own true self. And Prakriti is everything material. So the matter and the material aspect of the universe is known as Prakriti, and Purusha is the consciousness. So please give me your attention for 5 minutes. That's all. After that, it will be light. This is a little bit of difficult topic or a complicated topic. So now when you think about yourself in the current state, remember we talked about this extensively last week. I think I am a combination of my body, mind, and I am aware of myself. This is my current state. Typically, I take myself, my body as part of me, my mind as part of me. And what yoga and the Vedanta and all the Indic traditions are telling is, there is a slight difference. You are not the body. You are not the mind. You are the awareness of these things, consciousness. So if you translate that into a Sankhyan terms, Sankhya tells your true identity is Purusha, and you may have Prakriti, the tools which you may need to interact with the world outside. So if you remember the example, Swapna Drishtanta we gave last week, in a dream you are living, in a waking state you are living. What was the only common thing that was common in dream and waking? You got a cut in the dream, but when you woke up, you don't need to go to to the shelf and take a plaster and dress your wound, because the cut happened to the dream body. So in the dream, it's a fact that there was a body, there was a mind, and that body and mind is not the body and mind you experience in the waking state. And extending that example, in your next birth, you may have a different body, different mind, but the awareness is the same. So yoga tells you that the awareness is Purusha, everything else is Prakriti. So the practice of yoga, what it means, shifting your current identity from your body and the mind to your consciousness, Purusha. If this is complicated, leave it right now, just take it. We are going to expound this in detail. But I wanted to bring out one point very clearly. When you look at this Western tradition, like Abrahamic tradition, or the Aristotle, Plato tradition, or the Saint Augustine tradition, there is a difference here. When you talk in yoga and Vedanta about the matter, per the Western model or their technology or terminology, the mind is considered not as a matter. But in Vedanta and yoga, the mind is considered as subtle matter. It's a little bit of hard to understand initially, but the closest example I can bring you is the example of a computer. In a computer, you can say that there are three components. One is the hardware, the other one is the software, and the third one is the electricity. The hardware is something which you can touch and feel, tangible, so that we can call it as physical matter. But the key component of the computer is the software. You cannot say that the hard disk is the software. The hard disk that weighs maybe 2.2 pounds. I'm just making that example equal to the human brain weight. That is the physical aspect. But the data you stored in that hard disk, can you weigh that data? So the 2.2 pound hard disk can store the video recording of your life from your birth to death, 80 years. So the subtle matter is something different, but it is matter. So that is very important. So Vedanta and yoga tells that your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your fear, your anger, nothing is you. It is something that is happening in the mind, which is a key tool you have. Your true identity is Purusha, which is the consciousness. And if you can separate yourself from your mind, if you can look at your mind objectively, that is the best way to operate it. That means you are not running away from the problem, but you are approaching the problem in a better way. So don't worry about that. This is the basic the idea of the Yoga Sutra. Now the problem is, if you are not the Prakriti, if you are only the Purusha, why that is not my experience? I feel that I am the body. I feel that I am the mind. That is what my current understanding. So there are different ways to shift this identity. So in the Yoga Sutra, the approach is very interesting. It's a unique approach. So the key focus of the Yoga Sutra is that you are Purusha. All the forms of activities you experience, all the emotions you experience are either in the mind or the byproduct of your mind. Interestingly, very interestingly, this is particularly true with the modern reductionist materialistic view. Only difference is that they don't accept the Purusha, but the viewpoint of the Prakriti, of the scientist, and even the agnostics, and even the Vedantins and yogis are different. So when you think about these scientists criticizing these models, please understand that they are not criticizing this model. They are criticizing these the other model, which considers the mind as part of the soul, which is different from this viewpoint at all. And now, if you are not the mind, if you are not the body, if you are not the emotions, if you are separate from that, how to be aware of that? Yoga Sutra gives two methodologies. Let's say that one methodology. Yoga Sutra tells that you are not able to identify your true identity. Why? Because of athyasa. That is the technical term used. Athyasa means overlapping. The simple example is, let's say that there is a plain crystal staying in front of you. Behind that crystal, if there is an orange cloth, what is your perception? What would be your perception of that crystal? That crystal will appear as orange. Is the crystal really is orange? No. The orangeness of the crystal doesn't belong to the crystal, but it was attributed or superimposed to the crystal. So like that, right now what happens? The thoughts, emotions, and feelings happening in your mind superimposes into your self-identity and creates a feeling that you are that. So the approach of yoga means there are different approaches to get out of it. The approach of Patanjali or the Yoga Sutra is systematically you try to stop or control all the thoughts that is happening in your mind. So initially you reduce. Let's say that you're exposed 100 items in front of you. Your concentration will be distributed among that 100 items. What Yoga Sutra tells is, it's like a laser beam focus. Initially, with the yogic practices, it tries to gain some control over your mind, your mental activity. Once you gain the control of your mental activity, you try to, instead of focusing on 1500 items, you try to focus on one item. And then you change that focus from a physical perspective to subtle. And finally, when there is nothing in the horizon of the mind to illuminate, Patanjali tells the consciousness has no alternative but to recognize itself. Think about this. You are trying to stop, everything else comes to your mind. This is a very unique approach. This is a little bit of different approach compared to the Vedanta, but with the same goal. So you try to stop your attention to everything comes to your mind with intense your meditative practice. That is where the meditation comes a big play. So with intense meditation practice, you try to stop every thoughts comes to your mind. And finally, there is nothing comes to your mind. Typically that happens in deep sleep. But here you're conscious. Consciously, you're resting. At that time, Patanjali tells this knowledge, whatever he is going to talk us, will enable the consciousness to discover itself. This is a very high level approach of yoga. right? In Vedanta, you have Shravanam, Mananam, Nidithyasanam. Here also you need the knowledge. You need to know that this is the, so no, there is no bypassing of knowledge, but the approach is slightly different. This needs advanced practices. And that is where you will see different type of meditative techniques that are coming. So these meditative techniques will help you to help our consciousness to see itself. This is the final goal of the yoga. And yoga said that this is how you gain the self-realization, and that will put an end to all your suffering. I know that this is a little bit overwhelming. I was trying to consolidate the whole final chapter of the Yoga Sutra in one slide, but we are going to explore this in 34 sutras. So don't worry about that. If you're not understanding this topic, just understand that Yoga Sutra is going to give you a step-by-step path towards self-realization through intense meditation practice and with some knowledge. Any questions or comments? Otherwise, we can move to the next topic. Sorry for taking a little bit hard topic, but it's in understanding. When we cover the Samathi Pada, when you come back to this topic, it will be crystal clear, I guarantee you. Okay, so if there is no question, let's see the structure of the book Yoga Sutra. So the Yoga Darshana or the Yoga Sutra has 4 chapters and 195 aphorisms. Some of you may say that, okay, I saw 196 aphorisms, but in some cases, 2 aphorisms were clubbed in. So after reading through that aphorisms, I feel that it is 195. So if you see 196, it's totally fine. These 196 aphorisms or 195 aphorisms were distributed in 4 chapters. The first chapter is known as Samathi Pada. So Samathi Pada means it is nothing about self-realization. It is talking about the state of a pure, calm, controlled mind. Because remember, yoga has 2 definitions. The first path is what? Nirodha or Samadho. Yuj yojane, yuj Samadho. So that second definition is what is the focus of the first chapter. So what is a Samadhi? How do you attain Samadhi? What are all the different stages of Samadhi? What is the path towards Samadhi? All that is discussed in chapter 1. Probably this is one of the complicated chapter of the Yoga Darshana. So that is where we are going to start next week. But it's fine. We will take care of it. The second chapter and the third chapter is where that famous Ashtanga Yoga is introduced. It's known as Sadhana Pada. Sadhana means practice. So the chapter on practice is going to give the sadhana. So there are 2 sadhanas described in the Yoga Sutra. One is called sorry, I had to plug the power. Sorry. So the sadhana, there are 2 sadhanas were given in Yoga Sutra. So the first one is this Ashtanga Yoga path, and the second path is known as sadhana is Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is pretty much similar to the Karma Yoga you see in Bhagavad Gita. It is Tapas, Swadhyaya, and Ishvara Pranidhana. This is Kriya Yoga. So this is the 2 sadhanas given in Yoga Sutra. We will see that. And also the third chapter called Vibhuti Pada, it describes once you do these practices, what exactly is the skills you are getting. You see that the concentration can give you a lot of power. And Patanjali gives a word of caution also. You can easily carry it away with that. So be careful. The experience or the power you gain cannot be utilized for anything else. So that's very important. So if you really think about Yoga Sutra, Patanjali, before going into the deep concentration, he emphasized yama and niyama. It's very important because otherwise the Samadhi state, it gives you a lot of concentration, a lot of mental power, meaning a lot of skill in your action. And if you are not rooted in dharma, what is going to happen? That skill can be used for a lot of non-dharmic activities. In our Puranic literature, you can see all these demons like Ravanas or Hiranyakashipu. They did a lot of sadhanas. They had an amazing power on their mind. But since they were not established in dharma, what happened? They misused and abused that power. Even in the modern world, you can see these ethical, means not the ethical hackers, the actual hackers, how much concentration they may have and how it is being used. So that is the third chapter. And finally, the fourth chapter is known as Kaivalyapadha. Kaivalyapadha is going to talk about that ultimate goal of yoga. The ultimate goal of yoga is the self-realization. It is the word meaning union. So this is the structure of the Yoga Sutra. 195 aphorisms in 4 chapters. The first chapter is Samathi Pada, which talks about the state of Samadhi, a well-placed, pure, calm, controlled mind, how to attain it, and what are all the steps towards that. And you will see, it goes so deep. The Samadhi is divided on a high level into 2 types, Samprajnata, Asamprajnata. And when this Samprajnata itself is divided into 4, Savikalpa, Sananda, Sasmita, like that. So you'll see, and he will give you very good definition on almost all the meditative practices in the world. And once you go to this chapter, then only you realize all these meditation classes you attend, it will touch on the top layer of this first level of Samadhi. That's it. Nothing goes beyond that. So here you will go much deep into almost every meditation practice as you heard, you will transcend that. So in between, we'll do a few meditation classes also, but this is the structure of the Yoga Sutra. So let's move. And now the problem is, I said this sutra is very brief and very short form. It's like a PowerPoint slide. The PowerPoint slide is always an outline. And when you have an outline, for you to understand that outline, it needs to be filled in by a speaker. Like that, E equal to mc square. It needs to be understood properly. So you cannot study a sutra without the help of a commentary, a traditional commentary. And that traditional commentary, which explains the sutra in an understandable format, is known as Bhashyam. Bhashyam, commentary. And for Yoga Sutra, the most popular Bhashya is written by Maharshi Vyasa on the 5th century. And this is not the Veda Vyasa. Just by the name, don't get confused with Veda Vyasa. Veda Vyasa lived much before that. Probably somebody in that lineage. So now the important point. See, Patanjali wrote this 2200 years back. And this Vyasa's commentary was written on the 5th century. So between BC 200 to the 5th century, this teaching was coming orally. And our assumption is that this teaching was faithfully transmitted. And in other words, our understanding of the Patanjali Yoga Sutra is completely dependent upon the interpretation and the understanding of Vyasa. Let's say that if Vyasa made a mistake, we are going to make a mistake. But the good thing is that it appears to be very authoritative. So prior to Vyasa, this teaching was faithfully transmitted through a teaching lineage. That is our assumption. And because of this Bhashya's importance and relevance, this Bhashya or this commentary of Vyasa attained the status as good as the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So that much popular it is. So please keep in mind that now whenever we interpret Patanjali, it is through the eyes of Vyasa. Just for the sake of completeness, we wanted to know that. So now let's talk about a few commentaries. Somebody asked me last week, what are all the commentaries of Yoga Sutra? And as I said, the most important commentary or the most authoritative commentary or the traditional commentary is Yoga Bhashya of Maharshi Vyasa. It came in 5th century, and this is the basis. Even for our class, for me, this is the springboard. I scan through all the commentaries, but whenever there is a deviation or a confusion, this is my final word. So please understand the importance. And the second most important commentary, at least in my mind, is called Yoga Bhashya Vivarana of Shankaracharya. So Shankara, who is traditionally known as the Bhashyakara, he wrote several commentary on all the Vedantic textbooks. But here, instead of writing a commentary on Yoga Sutra, he wrote a commentary on Vyasa's commentary. Again, there are some debates about the authorship, whether Shankara is the one or not. That is true for almost all Shankara's work. But it is means we can believe that it is Shankara, and he wrote a sub-commentary of Vyasa's commentary, and this was around 8th century. Coming down, right, in 9th century, there was another commentary. It is known as Tattva Vaisharadi. Tattva Vaisharadi. It is written by a scholar. His name is Vachaspati Mishra. Vachaspati Mishra is very popular. He wrote commentaries on Vedanta, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika. He's a great scholar. It's really, really good commentary. It's a scholarly commentary. Only one thing I have doubt, or people have doubt, is how much practitioner he was. How much practicing yogi he was. Was this purely based upon Shankara's and Vyasa's interpretation, or was he discovered something and wrote? We don't know. So that part is a little bit of gray area on Vachaspati Mishra. I'm just telling this as my own opinion. Please forgive me if anybody has any other opinion. This is purely mine, not any traditional. This is what I understood. The next commentary is known as Raja Marthanda. This commentary is written by a king called Bhoja Raja. Bhoja Raja was a king of Ujjain, Madhya Pradesh, in the Malwa region, very famous. He had all these Navaratnas in his court. So he wrote a commentary. Honestly speaking, there is not much in that commentary other than a paraphrasing of Vyasa's commentary. Again, this is my opinion. Please forgive me if I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but I'm just trying to say my opinion. So I saw that, but occasionally there are some insights, not a lot. So Vyasa's commentary paraphrased. But his greatest contribution is he's the one who composed the Prayer of Patanjali. Yogena Chittasya. That comes in this book. So Raja Bhoja. The next one is Yoga Vartika. This is on 15th century. Raja Bhoja was around 10th century. So I'm giving you in the sequence. In the 15th century, another commentary was created by Vijnana Bhikshu. Vijnana Bhikshu's commentary is really insightful. It gives you a lot of insights. And only thing is that Vijnana Bhikshu was an ardent Vedantin. And within Vedantin, he was a Bhakti school. His school was Bhakti, Vaishnava tradition. So, lot of bias towards that Vedanta and Bhakti is introduced in his commentary, but his commentary is really good. Vijnana Bhikshu. And then there is another commentary on the 16th century. It is called Yoga Maniprabha. It is by another saint called, or a ascetic called Ramananda Saraswati. It's again from a Vedantic perspective, but not a lot of addition from Vijnana Bhikshu's commentary. So that is what it is. Then there is another commentary called Bhaswati. This commentary, I would say, in 20th century, amazing commentary by Swami Hariharananda Aranya. Swami Hariharananda Aranya. He is a pure Sankhyan school. We have doubt whether Vijnana Bhikshu was a practicing yogi or Vachaspati Mishra was a practicing yogi. But nobody can question, nobody can even doubt that Swami Hariharananda Aranya whether he was a practicing yogi or not. I'll tell you this. This is 20th century. So it is in front of us. Historically correct. No doubt about it. The last 20 years of his life, he was living in a cave without any contact from the world. Can you imagine? He has taken deep meditative practices, and his commentary is based on his experience. He comments upon Vyasa's commentary, but this commentary is from a practicing yogi, Swami Hariharananda Aranya. It is known as Bhaswati, and the English translation of that is very popular. We do have a PDF. Anybody wants, you can download that. This is excellent book. And then there is a commentary of Yoga Sutra in the 20th century by Swami Vivekananda. And since we are in New Jersey, New York, it happens here only in New York. He taught the whole Yoga Sutra, and this is the only commentary he wrote himself. Every other speeches were, every other book of his talk was transcribed by his Western disciples. So, of course, it's a very short edition, but it has its own value. So, these are the popular commentaries of Yoga Sutra. So, somebody asked me, if you recommend, of course, in this particular course, I will give you everything as much as I can. But if somebody wants some extra reading, somebody is interested in going outside and read a little bit, if you want to take a little bit of adventure and study the Yoga Sutra, these are some of the commentaries I would recommend personally. The first commentary for the serious students who wanted to go deep into Yoga Sutra, the first book I would personally recommend is Yoga Sutra by Edwin Brandt. Edwin Brandt is I was pleasantly surprised. I was pointed to this by Swami Sarvapriyananda, but this book is so good. He's a teacher in Rutgers. He's a deep practitioner of Indic traditions, Vedanta and yoga. He wrote a book on Bhagavata Bhakti also. That is also a brilliant book. But please don't approach this as a simple book. This goes very deep. So please keep that in mind. So if you're a very serious student, wanted to do some further research on Yoga Sutra, I would suggest this Edwin Brandt's commentary. He touches almost every other commentary. Very authentic. I was pleasantly surprised and happy to see that commentary and effort from him. The second book I would suggest is this Yoga Philosophy of Patanjali by Swami Hariharananda Aranya. But keep that in mind. This is purely the Sankhyan terms are used. So if you are much familiar with the Vedanta terms, you may have to substitute your Vedanta terminology with Sankhya terminology. For example, like Savikalpa Samadhi would be Asamprajnata Samadhi. So purely Sankhyan, but you can see that this book is written from the experience. Another good book for reference is like you can refer 4 chapters on freedom. This is by the Bihar School of Yoga. Bihar School of Yoga is from the Shivananda lineage by Swami Satyananda Saraswati. This Swamiji is credited for the Yoga Nidra, the practice who documented and outlined. This is also a good book, but the first 2 is much, gives you more insight. Another good book is Inside Yoga Sutra. It is by Jagannath Kanaria. It is from the Integral Yoga Institute. It's a light book, but it can give you some insight. And then there is The Secret of the Yoga Sutra, another book. It's from the Himalayan Institute, from the Swami Rama's tradition. Dr. Rajamani wrote it. And then the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali by Swami Sachidananda. That's also a good reference. And then the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali by the Yoga Institute. Sri Yogendra, Jaydev Yogendra. That's also a good book. These are some of the books if you want to refer in part. Arnab, you were asking about this, so that's why I put this slide. And if you are interested in some of the podcast or talk, Ashabodha Ashram, Swami Tadatmananda, who lives down the street here, he has a lot of insight into this. I would strongly suggest you go to his YouTube channel and watch the meditation series he published. A lot of them are based on Yoga Sutra, and also he has a podcast. It's a free podcast or a recorded class on the entire Yoga Sutra. So if you are interested, you can listen. And those who want to go a little bit deep, that you can go to the app called Teachings of Swami Dayananda, and you can get the whole classes he done on Patanjali Yoga Sutra. This goes very deep. So that is another good source. I use that a lot. And then in YouTube or podcast, you get Patanjali Yoga Sutra class by Swami Tattvamayananda. He is from Ramakrishna Mission. His classes are good. And then finally, if you want to study a little bit more, you can go to Advaita Academy in YouTube. And there is a class given by Karanam Aravinda Rao, Dr. Karanam Aravinda Rao. He is a former DGP of Andhra Pradesh, and he conducts a lot of classes. So these are some of the good references for those who are interested in further studies. So in the interest of time, let's move to the next topic. The next topic is, who is Maharshi Patanjali? Maharshi Patanjali is the compiler of Yoga Sutra. And in India, it's very hard to separate history from mythology. Anything, it will be completely interleaved with history and stories. So we don't know what is history, what is added later. But tradition believes that Maharshi Patanjali is an incarnation of Adishesha. Who is Adishesha? The 1,000-hooded serpent who is the bed of Lord Vishnu. So that is the historical belief. And when you look at the Patanjali's picture or the image, you can see a snake hood. This is why, because it is considered as an incarnation of Adishesha. So the word Patanjali, so there is an interesting story. Let me take 2 minutes and introduce that story. Again, this is a mythological story. The Yoga Sutra doesn't ask you to believe this story or not. So it is up to you to believe or not. But just for completeness sake, I'm telling it. It doesn't matter. So the story tells that once Lord Vishnu was lying down on his serpent Adishesha, and Lord Shiva appeared there, and he did a dance called Tandava. That dance was so amazing. It had a lot of postures. All these 84 postures of yoga came there. And Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva had a perfect sync at that point of time. And Adishesha felt that the weight of Lord Vishnu has increased to an extent where he cannot hold. The moment at that point of time, the dance stopped, and Adishesha got back to the normal stage. And he asked Lord Vishnu, what is happening? How can you control your body and mind in this way? And then Vishnu said, this is what is yoga. And we want you to go to the earth and teach this for the humanity. So that is why Adishesha decided to go to earth as an incarnation. And he got actually as the son of a lady called Gonika. So this mother Gonika, who herself was a yogini, she was offering salutations to Lord's son. And when she was offering the water, she saw a small serpent there. So this Adishesha, who fallen into the hands of a folded hand, the hand that was folded, such hand is known as Anjali, right? This is the Anjali Mudra. So she was offering to Lord's son, and the water was there. So Patanjali fallen into the folded hand. So she named this child. The snake started talking to this Gonika and asked whether can I be your son. She was happy and she said yes. So the person who has fallen into the hand of a folded hand, Pata means fallen, Anjali means folded hand. So that is why it is Patanjali. So this is all mythology. This is not history. Please understand. But just for the sake of completeness, this is how the name Patanjali got. Another meaning of the word Patanjali is whenever you fold your hands, you salute somebody. That salutation is to that one Ishvara, right? Whether you call it as Krishna, Christ, or Allah, or anybody, or Shiva, all your salutations goes to that divinity. And Adishesha is part of that divinity. So to whom all the folded hands salute is also Patanjali. So these are the two literal meaning of the word Patanjali. And the greatness of the sage Patanjali is that these are all mythology. Let's go to the facts. The contribution of this Patanjali is he composed 3 great works. One is Mahabhashya. Mahabhashya is a commentary of Panini's Ashtatyayi. You will see the brilliance of his grammatical skill in this particular work. It is still available. It's a fantastic composition called Mahabhashya. The second work is Yoga Sutra. And the third one is he wrote a book on Ayurveda. Unfortunately, that book is not available right now. It is lost. But the other 2 is available to us. So personally for me, I don't care about the Adishesha story, the fallen to Gonika's hand. It doesn't matter for us. But what matters to us is what he has given to us, which is Mahabhashya and Yoga Sutra. So let's little bit more history. So the history is in the Mahabhashya, which is a book composed by Patanjali. It is said that Patanjali is a man from Gornada. That is the place. Now the puzzle is, where is this place? We don't know. This is the only thing we know. So there are 2 schools. One school tells that this Gornada could be an ancient name of Gonda, a place in Uttar Pradesh, about 50 kilometers from Ayodhya. So this place historically was very significant because this Gonda is the place where Lord Buddha and Mahabharya spent a lot of time. They are contemporaries of Patanjali. So there is a very good chance that Patanjali was there. And also this place was known for its Sanskrit learning and training. So a lot of people believe that Patanjali lived there. Another school believes that this Gornada is referring to Tirukonamalai. Tirukonamalai is a place in Sri Lanka. The modern name of that place is called Trincomalee. You might have heard it in Sri Lanka. So the reason why this is believed is all these ancient Tamil classical literature like Tirumandiram, that type of book refers that Patanjali comes from Tirukonamalai. Tirukonamalai means 3 triangular hill. There is a famous temple there. It is known as Koneshwaram Temple in Trincomalee, Sri Lanka. And the Tamil literature clearly tells that Patanjali came from this Trincomalee to Chidambar, Tamil Nadu, Thillai Nataraja Temple. And he stayed there, composed a lot of work. This is what another legend. We don't know what it is. But personally, if you ask me, I believe that since there is a lot of references in this Tamil literature, this might be more accurate. And it is believed that the Samathi of Patanjali, it has happened in Tirupattur. So Brahmapurishwar Temple, there is a temple. Means that is where he left his body. Samathi means nothing more. I'll explain the difference later. But this is 30 kilometers from Trichy, Tamil Nadu, India. So that is where his Mahasamadhi happened. Again, there is no evidences. These are all 2 popular thoughts that happens, meaning that is prevailing. So, means as I said, like in Tamil literatures, because Tamil Nadu has a great ancient classical literatures. It's amazing, right? So in those literature, you can see Patanjali was often referred. I was studying a book called Tirumandiram of Tirumular. So in that Tirumandiram, it is said that Patanjali learned the yoga with 7 other disciples from great Nandikesha in the Thillayamman temple of Chidambaram. So there is a verse I quoted there. He said, the person Tirumular said, Nandikesha taught this yoga to 4 Nandis, and then Shiva Yoga Muni, another Muni was referred, Vyakrapada, another Muni was referred, and I. So 8 people were taught this thing. And you can see a beautiful painting from the couple of paintings from the Chidambaram temple, the Nataraja temple. In the second picture, you can see Patanjali and Vyakrapada is see. Patanjali, you can say one with the serpent leg, and the Vyakrapada is one with the tiger leg. Again, these are all mythology. It doesn't matter, but just for the sake of completeness, I'm just sharing this. That's it. So this is, the Tamil literature says that Patanjali lived in this Chidambaram, that area, Trichy area, coming from the Trincomalee, Sri Lanka. And there is another Tamil literature called Kali Kautuvam. It describes that this Patanjali and Vyakrapada, along with near Chidambaram, they watched a brilliant dance of Shiva and Kali, in which all these postures were elaborated. Again, there is no proof, nothing. This is all legends, but these are all some of the good reference. This is for academic purposes. I'm sharing it. Let's move. But so this Patanjali, who gives this brilliant yoga system for us through the Yoga Sutra, it is our tradition, before we commence the study of this text every day, we invoke Patanjali. So there is a beautiful prayer. This is composed by Raja Bhoja as part of his Raja Marthandam, but this is known as the popular the prayer of Patanjali. So let's listen to that prayer, and then we will quickly understand that prayer and go. Sorry, it is not playing, but the prayer is Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena Yopakarottam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranadosmi. So Patanjalim Pranjaliranadosmi. I salute that Patanjali with folded hand. Who is that Patanjali? Yopakarottam Pravaram Munina. He is the best among the sages. What is the speciality of this sage? He removed something. Apakarta means somebody removed something. So he removed three things. How? What exactly he removed? Malena. Malam means impurity. What exactly is the impurity? Three impurity he removed. He said, Yogena Chittasya. By giving us the tradition of yoga, he removed the impurities of our mind. Padena Vacham. By writing a brilliant book on grammar, he removed the impurities of our speech. And by writing a beautiful book on Ayurveda, he removed the impurities of our body. So Yogena Chittasya. With yoga, he purified our chitta, mind. Padena Vacham. With the Mahabhashya, he purified our words or speech. Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena. The impurities of the body was cleared through the Ayurveda book. Yopakarottam Pravaram Munina. The one who eliminated all these malas. He is the best among the sages. To that Patanjali, I salute. This is a brilliant prayer. We recite this every day prior to the class. And you can see in the modern world, there are different depictions of Patanjali. You can see what is stored in the Baba Ramdev's ashram. And also you can see the depiction of Patanjali by the Isha Foundation. You can see almost all the tradition. Art of Living has their own picture. So there are a lot of things are going on. So let's listen to the prayer once again.
Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena Yopakarot Tam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranadosmi.
I already posted this recording by the great singer Kavalam Srikumar into our group, so you can download and listen to this. This is such a beautiful prayer on Patanjali. So now let's finish this session. Just I wanted to show you some pictures. This is what is the Trincomalee, the Trikoneshwaram Temple. It's a beautiful temple in Sri Lanka. And these two temples, what you are seeing is the Thillai Ambaram Temple in Chidambaram. Magnificent temple, you can see. And this is the picture of that temple where Patanjali is shown. And this is the temple where Patanjali is supposed to have attained the Mahasamadhi or left the body. So you can see the place they kept as it is. This place is where it is supposed to be the place he left the body. So all this is there. You can go to these temples and see. These are some of the historical evidences what we have right now. And with that, we come to an end of this session. Let's see. Okay, so that covers today's topic. So as always, what we will do is, if you have any questions, you can stay, and we can, others, if you want to drop, you are welcome to drop. So let's go to the Q&A mode. Hope this session was useful. It was a lot of historical information, but what I was trying to do was trying to give some insight into the Yoga Sutra.
Rajaji, wonderful session as always. Quick question. So you presented so many different literatures, so many different sources, Bhashyas of Patanjali, and you also went into details on podcasts and other resources.
Right.
But sometimes when you have so many options, you get confused. So if someone were to start out, which is one good source that is universally applicable for everybody? Which is your favorite?
Honestly speaking, that is difficult. So every commentator has their own point of view. So if you don't want to spend a lot of time, just stick with this class, with the slides. But next level, if you want to go, I would say read Edwin Brandt and Swami Hariharananda Aranya, 2 books, if I refer to. These 2 would be good because it covers almost everything. But I'll try to cover as much as possible from all these sources I showed. So my approach is, as I said, I use Vyasa's commentary as the base. Because of my fascination for Shankara, I always refer his work. But I don't want to deviate myself from Sankhya. So I just make sure that I read Swami Hariharananda Aranya, and I also read Edwin Brandt. And of course, I listen to Swami Dayananda's lectures he gave in the 3-year classes. So these are my sources. I refer to these other books like Vachaspati Mishra, Vijnana Bhikshu, Raja Bhoja occasionally, just to see that, because some of these commentaries are very scholarly. They will go after page after page after page after page. So if you are not very patient, it will be very difficult and it can be very overwhelming. So I would suggest first round, I would suggest even stick with this class. And then once you have a little bit of understanding, go deep.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Commentary. My commentary is that in Western traditions, we tend to look at mythology as it's not a truth.
Yeah.
But lately, there have been many psychologists that think that mythologies are like the subconscious of the whole community. So that we should pay attention not as a literary fact, but the teaching that they hide behind. Because mythologies were a way to put things in such a way that they would not be lost.
Correct.
Yeah, and so I have a lot of respect for Indian mythologies, because they have so much wisdom behind, and also it's like they make easy things to understand for us or to absorb and maybe digest later. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Your comments on mythologies are welcome, and thank you for such a wonderful class. And my other question is, how much of Vedanta is in Samkhya? Because when I see the cosmology and things in Vedanta is exactly the same as Samkhya.
There are differences. So the approach is common. Since you asked that question, let me give you the answer. So in Vedanta, especially on the Advaita Vedanta, tradition,
Uh-huh.
the reality is only one. The absolute reality is only one. The Prakriti is a derivative of Purusha. So only Purusha is the absolute reality, and Prakriti is a derivation of Purusha. That's the biggest difference. But in Sankhya, it is said that Purusha and Prakriti are two fundamental realities. That's one thing. Second thing is, the thing is that this is the biggest, another big difference. In Sankhya, they don't talk about the God. In Vedanta, they talk about an Ishvara, which is the total body, total mind, and total intellect.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, even though Yoga Sutra follows that Sankhya metaphysics on Purusha, Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, etc., but Yoga Sutra heavily emphasized on that Ishvara. So to be very specific, chapter 1, verse 23 to 31 is Ishvara Pranidhana. He tells that, and when it's beautiful, like he tells Ishvara is there, and Ishvara he uses a Purusha Vishesha, a Purusha who is right from the birth is not affected by the karmas or the vasanas or any other impurities, and kind of what Vedanta talks, because this is pretty much what Krishna talks in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And additionally, another difference is there, but now I don't want to go there, because in Sankhya, it is said that there is multiple Purushas. Even though Purusha is an absolute reality, there are multiple Purushas. But in Vedanta, it tells there is only one. There is one reality, which is more logical, right? Which is whose manifestation is the entire universe. So the 7th chapter and the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita clearly tells that. Now, Patanjali, he is completely silent on that, but he doesn't care whether there is one Purusha or multiple Purusha. He is only focusing on how do you shift your identity from Prakriti to Purusha. So that's why this Yoga Sutra is equally good for both Vedanta tradition and yoga, the Sankhya tradition.
Mm-hmm. I've seen somewhere, I don't remember, that the ultimate reality is called Tat, which means that it doesn't give a name.
Correct.
And from that reality, when it polarizes itself, the two Purusha and Prakriti are born.
That is Vedanta.
And
so that is purely Vedanta tradition. So
okay, yeah, then from Prakriti, then the gunas come, and then you know.
This is the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna tells, I have a lower nature and a higher nature. And this is what the Upanishads point of view also. So again, the interesting thing is that this is where the complexity comes in, right? Both Sankhya and Vedanta, two masters interpreted looking at the same source. The same source is the Vedas. So and even within Vedanta, you have 3 schools. There is Advaita, Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita. So this is a different master's perspective on the same truth. And that is why you see in Veda, there is one verse, right? Ekam Sat Vipra Bhakhuta Vatanti. So the truth is only one. It is the different viewpoints of the different masters.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
If Purusha and Prakriti and Sankhya is kind of going in parallel, it's very closer to the Vedanta, the second Vedanta, Dvaita Vedanta, right?
Yeah.
Because they're also like, it is kind of separate.
Absolutely, it is separate. And the difference is, again, in the Dvaita Vedanta, the Purusha is only one. In Sankhya, it is many. Again, small differences, but there are differences. And Patanjali is clearly silent on all those things. He is only using this Prakriti Purusha model, matter versus consciousness. And his emphasis is that you are not matter. Matter is a tool given to you. That's all. Which is perfectly fine with the Vedanta tradition. So these are all scholarly aspects. Yeah.
And in Prakriti, it will include the Sukshma, Stula, the body, the mind,
Absolutely.
all
Yeah.
matter.
So that part, Vedanta and Sankhya is exactly the same. So the Stula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Karna Sharira, all that aspects, the Panchakosha, all those models are seen. And you can see in Bhagavad Gita also, a lot of Sankhya terminology is used. Like, for example, the Sattva Rajas Tama, it is Sankhya. And yeah, so what I'm thinking is, this is my again, only my view, it may not be correct. So what I'm thinking is, these compartmentalizing the whole darshanas into 6 came much later. So around 2200 BC. Before that, the whole thing was mixed. So when Mahabharata was composed, you can see a lot of Sankhya and Vedanta put in there together. So this compartmentalization comes a little bit later. And after that, each branch started flowing like this. And you can see that in the Upanishads also. So the Upanishads, like whole Rig Veda, there are a few Upanishads comes in, I believe some 10 plus. Yajurveda, some Upanishads comes in. Like that, all these Upanishads are there. But each of the teaching tradition, through their lineage, there is a different version. So as of now, there are totally around 1,100 different branches. So of the same truth. So it happens to such a vast literature. It happens to such a deep literature. So this is where the complications comes in. But as practitioners, our interest is look at the Yoga Sutra or Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads and try to practice.
What about the concept of the Antakarana, the inner vehicle of, Manas, Chitta, Buddhi?
Sure. So Antakarana means instrument.
Yeah.
That is the technical term. So there are 2 types of instrument in your body or in your physical body and subtle body. So one is called a Bahya Karana. Bahya Karana means your 5 sense organs, action, and 5 sense organs of perception. And Antakarana means the inner instrument. So the mind, intellect, and your chitta, is the memory bank, is considered as inner instrument.
Yeah, but so, what's the position of Samkhya and Vedanta on
this? It's same. Those are all same.
Yeah, okay.
There is no difference. I think the difference is only in that 10%, last portion. See, the thing we need to be very clear is that both Sankhya and Vedanta accepts the Vedas as the authority. Whatever Veda says, it is the final authority. So the difference is only in some of the technical terms and approaches. And one more thing, right? So in the traditional Vedanta, how one gains self-realization is, first you do the Karma Yoga, then you do the meditative practice. When you do the Karma Yoga, what happens is your mind becomes pure. When you do the meditative practice, which is the Dhyana Yoga, you get stability. When the mind is stable and pure, they say your Antakarana is Shuddha, clear, pure. Now, with that pure Antakarana, which is mind, you need to do Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasana. You try to understand the nature of the reality. You need to study that with a master for a sufficient period of time. Manana means you need to contemplate upon that. Nididhyasana means you need to practice a particular type of meditation to reinforce or remove any habitual understanding. Because habitually you feel that your body, even though you got the knowledge, it won't go. And that is how you reach self-realization. Patanjali follows the same steps. The first step is you need to have a stable, pure mind. So his Yama Niyama and his Kriya Yoga is going to give you that pure mind. Yama Niyama and Kriya Yoga. Then your Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and the lower levels of Samadhi is going to give you the stability of the mind. And with that, right, the Kriya Yoga has one thing, Swadhyaya, study of the scripture, especially the 4th chapter, which is going to tell you that your essential nature is Ishvara. And once, or the Purusha, once you gain that knowledge, you are supposed to instead of Shravanam, Mananam, Nidithyasanam, the approach is slightly different. So what he tells is, with your meditative concentration, you try to shut down all the thoughts, and finally there is nothing. You see your own consciousness, which is the Kaivalasya Bhava. That is why the word Kaivalya means Kaivalasya Bhava. There is nothing else to see. That is why it's technically same as that of moksha, but in yoga literature it is known as Kaivalya. Kaivalya means when there is nothing else to see, your consciousness will become conscious of itself. That is the theoretical idea. We will see this in detail, but these are all the advanced techniques. So if advanced portions, so if you are confused, don't worry about that at all. This fact.
Rajaji,
Yes.
Sri Paramhansa Yogananda, the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, he talks extensively about Kriya Yoga. That's the technique that his organization also teaches. Is that Kriya Yoga the same as the Kriya Yoga we are?
Yeah, pretty much similar. Pretty much similar. Even in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls out Kriya Yoga. So these are all, see, it's Kriya Yoga, Patanjali, it is tapas, swadhyaya, and Ishvara pranidhana. It's pretty much similar to our Karma Yoga only. Swadhyaya is the knowledge part. You study the scripture. It is emphasized because, see, in 16th chapter of the Gita, also Arjuna asked the same question. Suppose I have faith, but I don't know what to do. Is that going to help? Krishna said, faith is good. It is going to, but if you want to good progress, understand what you.
But in the end, tapas, practicing sadhana consistently, I think that's.
Tapas is misinterpreted again. Tapas, usually people feel that you're hanging down in a tree or staying in one leg. Absolutely not. Tapas means whenever you put consistent effort towards a goal. But in you can see, if you're interested, you refer to 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. 3 types of tapas. This is subdivided into the body level tapas, the speech level tapas, the mental level tapas is described brilliantly.
Chapter 17.
17, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll cover that. We have a parallel Gita class, so we will there soon.
Are you going to cover that?
Yeah, we will cover in the Gita class. Right now we are in the 4th chapter, but when we go to the 17th, we will cover that.
Okay, and that happens on Tuesdays.
Tuesdays, yeah, Tuesdays 8th means we just gave the introduction last week of the 4th chapter. Now tomorrow, this Tuesday, we will start the verses. So one more interesting thing. So Patanjali, even he calls out God and Ishvara Pranidhana, and in Sutra 24 he tells who created this teaching of yoga. Nowadays, everybody's attention is they wanted to show that I created something, right? I found something. So Patanjali tells this teaching came from the Ishvara. So 4th chapter, Krishna starts with this. Imam vivasvate yogam proktavan aham avyayam. Vivaswan manave praha manurichwakave bravit. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduhu. Sakale neha vachasa yogo nashta parantapaha. Then he tells that original teaching which was given long time back is repeated by me. It is not my idea at all. So both Krishna and Patanjali calls that out. So this is a perennial teaching. Like we will see that's in the Gita, but there is a very good explanation. Shankaracharya brilliantly explains. When you say that it is universal, what does that mean? Beautifully explained by Shankara. She will cover that. And we will see that in the Yoga Sutra also later point of time. Any other questions or comments?
Ajuji, one quick question. So you mentioned that Swami Vivekananda gave the last commentary, or the
not last commentary. He also gave one commentary. For example, the Edwin Brand's commentary is only recent, 5 years, 10 years back.
Swami Vivekananda's was older, of course. So was that commentary Raja Yoga, and is that the same? Is Raja Yoga the same?
No, actually his book on Raja Yoga, he gave a lot of lectures on Raja Yoga. And then he wrote a book on the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So when you buy that book from Ramakrishna Mission, it has 2 parts. Part 1 is his lectures on Raja Yoga. Part 2 is his commentary on Yoga Sutra. I personally feel that his lectures on Raja Yoga was much profound than his commentary on Yoga Sutra. Yoga Sutra is a very high level commentary. But even though it's very high level, he came up with some brilliant examples. For example, the classic example I often quote is the lake. So he is the one who compared the human mind like a lake. He said like a jewel is lying down at the bottom of that lake. You are trying to look for that jewel. Let's say that that lake is muddy and that lake is turbulent. Even if a teacher tells you that the diamond is lying down at the bottom of the lake, you won't see it. So first you have to, what you do? Make sure that all the dirt is clean. Then you make the water calm. When that lake is pure and calm, whatever teacher said, follow that. Look deep into that water, you will see that jewel. This is one of the brilliant example, easy example to understand the practices. So this is he only gave it. And he himself was a real practicing yogi. You can see in New York, it's only happened here only in New York. So you can go to that center, you can read the notes written by the then mayor of New York. He tells like, I come here one day. I saw him, it was around 7 o'clock in the evening. I saw Swami meditating, deep meditating. He didn't even know that I came in. I said, okay, let me go back. The next day morning he came in. Swami was sitting there. So you can see he can go on forever. Like his concentration power was very much known. And that explains why he could retain all these stuff. And all these great teachers of New York, I mean, his Western disciples has certified it. If Vivekananda reads something, he can easily retain it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. His memory was commented by a lot of, even the Tesla commented, right? I wish I had that memory power of Vivekananda. He's just read a text, it's in his head. So that much of concentration he had.
For more technical stuff, I think Tiju Knight from the Himalaya Institute has written something, I think, technical and also traditional.
Right.
He's good at that,
Yeah.
Yes.
Only problem with Vivekananda literature is, again, it's not a problem. It's again my observation. A lot of his lectures were transcribed by somebody. It's not that he wrote an article. So when you transcribe a lecture, depending upon the context, sometimes you may not get that full integrated view. So his literature is not a substitute for the traditional teaching, right? So you need to understand this step by step. Then you go and read his literature. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
His literature is good to get introduced. All of us got fascinated by Vedanta only after reading him. So this is a good primer. Then once you get inspired, go back to the traditional teaching like Shankara or because the beauty of both Vedanta and yoga is not, I always repeat this, not just the uniqueness of its content, because every tradition, if you go to Christianity, you get wonderful content. You go to any other tradition, you get, but the uniqueness of Vedanta and yoga is the teaching methodology. For example, this Panchakosha model, the Dridrishya Viveka model, the Swapna Drishtanta model, they are very unique. It tells you very systematically, logically, how you can understand yourself. And then once you study, go through that conventional traditional study, you go back to Vivekananda, you back to Bible, read any scriptures. It makes complete sense to you. Both Paramahamsa Yogananda and Vivekananda, they were wonderful teachers, but they were talking to masses. They were talking to masses who do not have any exposure to these things, right? So they have to make it very light. So that's another point. So that brings us to 12:30, but it was great. So with this, we will conclude the introduction. So any questions, please post. It'll be a pleasure, but excited to start the first chapter from next Sunday. Thank you very much. And I will see you next week.
Did you post the link to the Bhagavad Gita classes?
Yeah. I posted. I'll send that again.
Okay, please.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to participate.
Sure. And the recordings are also always available also. And
Okay.
materials are always available.